Some weeks ago, I was scrolling through Instagram and I came upon this video of this young minister who I want to believe was charging up his audience to pray, to seek hard after God. That was the only snippet posted, so I can't be sure of the exact context. But anyway, this minister was saying something along the lines of, how many people did God call alongside Pastor Adeboye? How many of them are we still hearing of today? This is not just about being a pastor. This is about men who can pay the price for a generation. Something along those lines. I can't lie. Watching that video dealt a blow to my own heart because I remembered my much earlier days in ministry when we had just read God's Generals Was It, and we would lay hold of a mic and regurgitate the same things that this minister was saying. We would mention the Finneys, the Colemans, the Macphersons, the Lakes, and all the popular God's Generals, and say something that sounded a lot like, how many people did God call alongside these people? How many of them are we still hearing of? These men paid the price to carry the weight of God in their generation, so we have to also pay the price to carry the weight of God in our generation like they did. I have repented of this in the past, but watching that video made me repent again. Now, this video is not to address the paying the price part. That conversation will certainly receive my contribution at a later time. Today, I want to speak to this idea that instructs us that success, whether in ministry or in whatever else, is a function of prominence. That the one who is more popular, the one who has more fame, is somehow the one who has done or is doing something well. Elijah made the same mistake. He lamented to God and said, look, these people have forsaken your covenants. They've destroyed your altars. They've killed your prophets. I am the only one left and they're seeking to take away my life. God said to Elijah, I have 7,000 in Israel who have not bowed their knees to Baal, nor used their mouths to kiss him. 7,000. But Elijah was convinced that he was the only one who was doing right by God. Because the natural man is like that. He esteems the things that are most accessible to his senses. If he can see it, taste it, touch it, hear it, smell it, he venerates it over the things that he cannot see, taste, touch, hear, or smell. But God is not like man. He delights in doing things in obscurity, and he often chooses to do things in obscurity. If the fact that the men that God may have called alongside Pastor Adeboye are not as renowned as he is, and that is your benchmark for judging that they have not paid the price for a generation, that is your benchmark for judging that they are not as successful in ministry as Pastor Adeboye is, that is your benchmark for judging that they have somehow missed it or failed, I plead with you to reevaluate this thing that you believe. And after you've evaluated it, I hope and pray that you can repent of it just as I have. Obscurity is not proof that God is not with a man or that a man has failed. Also, fame is not proof that a man has succeeded or that God is with a man. Neither of these things is proof of anything. God uses obscurity as much as he uses fame. In fact, one might even argue that God seems to use obscurity more than he uses fame. In this case of Elijah, for example, anyone would have looked at him and thought that he was God's last man standing. But the infinitely wise and powerful God had 7,000 more like Elijah who had not given themselves over to the idolatry of the time. Can you imagine that ratio? 1 to 7,000. While we judge with our parochial reasoning that Elijah is the only one who has paid the price to carry the weight of God in a generation, God himself is testifying of and delighting in his 7,000 hidden witnesses. Men in small towns, pastors of 10, missionaries who are risking their lives to take the gospel to alcoves that have never even heard of a Jesus. The small fellowship of praying widows that God is using to heal the sick and bring the dead back to life, who cannot speak English as well as we do, or know systematic theology as good as we know it, but who house such a tangible presence of the living God and who are reaping a harvest of souls in the small corner of the earth where they are. Women that we will only know about when we get to heaven. We will not hear a word of them on this side of eternity. We only see one and we think that that one is all that there is, but God has his 7,000. The mother teaching her daughter to be a woman after God's heart. The father raising his boy to walk in the righteous way of the Lord. These ones are touching a generation for God. They might be obscure, but they are not insignificant. God knows them. God knows them by name, and their reward is with him. This is a note of encouragement to everyone, but especially to young ministers like myself. Simplify your life. Follow Jesus. Go where he sends you. Make yourself available for service as God opens these doors of servitude. Love the Lord passionately and follow the discipline of the word. That's it. Whether you will be an Elijah on the mountain or one of the 7,000 that he graciously hides, that is God's discretion. God amplifies and minifies as he wills. If tomorrow the voice that was formerly loud becomes not as loud or even goes completely quiet, it does not mean that they failed or that God is no longer with them. If the voice that was formerly quiet becomes loud, it does not mean that they've succeeded or that God is with them. Vice versa is also the case. Neither of these things means anything. God uses and does whatever he chooses. The only safe acid test for judging who is doing it right and who is not is fruit. Not numbers, fruit of the Spirit. And because we have no way of judging the fruit of those in obscurity, we should refrain from saying such things as, God called all of them, but how many of them are we hearing of today? Stop saying that. If you want to encourage men to seek after God, point them to seek God for God himself, not for the fame or affluence that he can give them for his glory. Point them to a God who changes the hearts of men and brings them into conformity to the image of the eternal Christ, not a God who changes the earthly status of men for his kingdom's sake. Finally, I just want to take advantage of this privilege that I have to talk to you and say that if you've ever heard me preach anything in this fashion, if in my zeal I have unwittingly led you to believe that the Kuhlmans and Wigglesworths are more important or useful or successful in God's kingdom than those who are not as popular as them, I'm deeply sorry. I repent of my error and my foolishness. Truly, zeal without wisdom is a dangerous thing. Please forgive me. And I hope that this short clip might serve to rectify some of the damage that my days of folly might have caused. May God keep us from stumbling.